right, so let's go in InDesign and show a little bit of how to animate. So I created a simple green box, and I'm going to go in the animation palette with that selected. I'm going to pull it out here for now so you can see the two. And if you notice, it says rectangle and named it rectangle. And if I go in here, I can choose it to do all kind of stuff. Appear, that is fade in, fade out, disappear, sorry, fade in, fade out. These are very, very similar, as you can imagine. Fly in from the bottom, fly in from the left, fly in from the right. Now, appear and disappear do not have actually the going from 0 to 100%. They just turn on and off, versus the fade in, fade out has an opacity change, obviously. Fly in from the bottom, all these grow large, move to the left. Let's do a fly in from the bottom for the sake of it. You see that it does this arrow right here, this kind of motion path. And if you notice, it even previewed it for us. Every time you mouse over here, it shows you how it does. If you go on the preview palette right here, you can see it again. And it's just one page, so I don't have to, oops, this thing. The only downside in my computer is that this preview thing does not really get bigger. That is very annoying. Sorry about that. If I go in interactive, I'm trying to go in interactive SWF preview because that one opens it bigger by default. So you have different ways to get to here, and that's kind of one way. So if you notice, that's what it does. So every time you need to animate, one way to do it, the easiest way to do it, is to go through the presets. Now I will show you all the stuff. This is actually an animation can be triggered by a button, and it can be triggered by a series of events. Like this is happening right now on page load. But I could say, look, what if I actually make it happen when I click self, or when I'm on rollover, or on page click, or etc., etc. So if I actually right now I say on click self, for example, it has also though saved the page load. I don't know if you noticed. So you need to make sure you uncheck the page load. And now if I preview it, and let me go back, I wish I hadn't closed that preview. Let's see if this one will help us do it. Now you see that this thing is actually a problem because the button is not there. What happens is at first it's down here and then moves in. So on the click self, in this case, it doesn't work. So be aware that depending on what you do, it will make a big difference. So these actions here, in this case, the page load, if something is outside of the screen, is the only sometimes way to go. That when the page loads, that object flies in, and then when you have it here, you can make it do whatever you want. But I will show in the next demo how to use more of these actions and how to actually make a button trigger that animation. Here, you can obviously talk about how not only maybe it fades in like this, it comes in like this, but you might say, hey, and I want it to rotate, 45 degrees, and I'm going to leave it for now. Or while it fades in, I want it to scale, 200% in both directions right here. So now when it comes in, it should get bigger, etc., etc. So let me actually right now, though, close the animation or put the animation away and show you a few more pieces that we need in order to do the next exercise together. The next step is, how do I do a multi-state or object state? So I'm going to do Command D right now, and I'm going to grab some images. So I'm going to grab this image. I'm going to do a Command D again, and I'm going to grab another image, and I'm put it exactly on top. Make sure you deselect or it's going to load it in the same place. You want multiple images. If you notice, this one is on top of this one, right? So I'm going to put multiple images on top of each other. Command D, I'm going to put another one. And then Command D, and I'm going to put another one, the last one. So, right here. So if you notice, I have one image on top of the other. Why does that matter? Do you remember last class we did an exercise, the interactive PDF, in which we had all these images across different pages, right? And we were moving through the pages. Now, sometimes when you have a lot of images, you don't necessarily want to have 50 pages there. So what you do instead is these multi-state objects or object states in which the images are simply one on top of the other. How do you do it? Beyond putting the images one on top of the other, you go under an option called object states. And look up, guys, because that will explain it, just looking at how it works. So if you go in object state and then you click on new, right now it shows you that you have multiple, sorry, I only selected the first one. How do I select them all? You click and drag. I apologize, I had just clicked on the top one. That was a bad idea. You want to click and drag, that will select all the images you have in there, and then you finally create that state, and now you can see that I have multiple images in there. So you need to make sure you click and drag so you have them all selected. And now you have multiple images in there. So as you can imagine, in the next exercise, what we'll do is we'll create thumbnails that trigger this object state so that you can see, depending on what you click on in terms of thumbnail, you can see a different image showing up. So that's the second piece of information you need to know. Lastly, if we're doing thumbnails, right now I'm going to actually delete all this. If we're doing some thumbnails, another thing I want you to know is how do you use a grid of images? How do you create a grid of images? And I showed this in the 182, and there is a video, an entire video of, I don't know, 15-20 minutes on Polylearn, but I'm going to give you kind of the short version. You want to click on this container, container like generic container, because oftentimes you don't know if you're going to do images or text, so sometimes it's kind of nice to create a grid and then customize it to what you need. This is what I'm doing right now. Then you're going to click and drag, and then use your arrow keys to determine how many columns or how many rows you want. I'm using the right arrow keys and the top arrow keys. If you hold Command and you use the arrow keys, it changes the size of the gutter. You know what the gutter is, right? The distance between those little, you can see I'm doing it. I'm using the arrow keys to make more or less space in between those little cells. And then once you have the cell selected, you can say, okay, I'm going to want as a content graphic, and then you go in and import all the graphic. So these are the three pieces to know to be able to understand and be productive throughout the next demo. That is animation, how to create object states or multi-state objects, and how to create a grid to populate with thumbnails that then will trigger that object state. Now, the reason why the animation is important is because what we're going to do is we're going to make that grid of thumbnails fly in from the side. So is everybody with me so far? Okay, fantastic. I'm going to actually stop the, I don't know where's the button.